May, we will be having an in-person program, and by then we hope to have our technical things worked out, so we'll be able to meet in person for the local folks that want to come, but we can also present it online. We will have a herpetologist there, and they will bring their snakes. They have, this is a scarlet king snake. They have one of those, and it's very friendly, and they also have a really nice corn snake that they will have there for us to meet, and it's really a cool program. And then we have our I Spy Nature walks every other month. And on May 15th, we'll be at Winghaven, which is a bird sanctuary in the heart of Myers Park in Charlotte. And it's amazing. It's beautiful in there. You can just see that what can be done even, in a city, in the heart of a city. And we will have that posted, the event posted on our Facebook page and Instagram. Coming up, but we hold these at 3:00 on a Sunday afternoon because most people are like, well, what am I going to do today on Sunday afternoon? So that's a fun place to be. And so now I'm going to introduce you to our speaker. Lisa Tompkins is a friend of mine that I've met through my interest in native plants, and she has taught me an awful lot. She is a North Carolina native. She got her bachelor's in psychology from UNC Charlotte, and she has an AAS in horticulture technology from Central Piedmont Community College. She began working as a landscape designer in 2004 with an increasing emphasis on native plants and sustainable design. And that she has a business, it's called It's Elemental Landscape Design, and she does fabulous work. So I encourage you to look that up. In addition to that landscape design, she currently operates a small native plant nursery called Carolina Heritage Nursery. It's a great source to get natives, especially some of the local ecotypes or the straight species that sometimes are hard to find. She's been certified as a North Carolina residential in residential rain gardening. She's a North Carolina plant professional and received her certificate in native plant studies from UNCC Gardens. When she's not working, she tends to her own gardens, scouts the woods and the roadsides of the Carolina Piedmont in search for native plant discoveries, and explores her own property and posts those pictures. And I hope you will start following her on Facebook because it's really kind of fun to do. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now and turn it over to Lisa.
Hello.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi. Let's see.
Let's see.
Oh, yeah, there's mine. I see mine.
Get on to share screen.
Okay. Is that right? Your screen share. Okay. Okay. How's that?
There we go.
You see it? Okay. Okay. Well, thank you for having me this evening. And it's and shade is a natural thing to have in for a native plant garden, because we would mostly be either hardwood forest or grasslands. So that gives us shade. And who would not appreciate shade in the middle of July? I do. This picture actually is a coastal garden, but I left it in there just because it has such great branches. So those don't grow in the Piedmont, but it does cast some nice shade. All right. Well, one thing to get clear is, what is shade? You would think that would be a simple answer, but it really isn't. I've noticed that from talking to people. So I borrowed from the North Carolina Cooperative Extension website, who actually defines shade, their shade: dappled sunlight, which is what you can see here, where you have a tree canopy, and then kind of a constant light is coming through here and there. And then on the left there, you see deep shade, which really you do not often encounter deep shade in nature, But with the way we build houses now, where one building is casting shade upon another, you may never get any sun in there. So that would be deep shade. And there are some places in nature that would do the same. A north facing bank, say, or rock face would do that. On the right here that's actually a piece of my front foundation, which is east facing. And it would be partial shade because it gets 2 to 6 hours of sun a day. Normally, I would consider that morning sun. 6 hours of afternoon sun, I would consider full sun because it's harsh. It's much harsher than the morning sun. So, and that can be a great exposure for shade plants. Now, one thing you need to know, and this is, I know people mostly hate this stuff, but by knowing where your north is, which you can find it on your tax map, you can find it on a compass. But by finding your north, then you can predict where you're going to have sun and shade throughout the seasons, because the sun rotates on the Earth's axis. So in the summer, it's directly overhead. So if you face north, I mean, this is what I do. I face north and use my elbow so from the right, that's east, to the left, that's west. That's how the sun moves in the summer. But in the winter, the sun is lower in the horizon and it does not make as big a rotation. So you kind of have to, it changes through the seasons. And those are things that you would want to know. So anyway, you can go to your county tax map if you don't know where your north is. And I just use my body. I have to use my body, face it north, and use my arm and then look to see what kind of, do I have a building that will shade, or a tree, or, something. My own your own house, is it going to shade the bed or the area that you're thinking about? But that's an important thing to know. And get to know your landscape. You have sun exposure, which we're talking about now, but you also want to know your moisture levels, and that's kind of your natural moisture levels. Yes, you can use irrigation, but sometimes that's not available, or you have restrictions or whatever. And like the top of a hill is naturally going to be drier than the bottom of the hill. Or if you have downspouts, that's going to be a naturally moist area. If your soil is sandier or siltier, it won't hold moisture as well as clay will hold it. But those are good things to know. And then I would like to emphasize, it is good to know the plants that exist in your landscape already. You don't have to know all their names, but it's good to kind of explore and figure out what's already there. Which comes to invasive plants. And I know this is not fun. This is not anything that anybody, well, some people enjoy it, but they suppress so much that would naturally be on your property, that if you have a significant invasive presence, which most people do, especially on older properties or a wooded property, and you could plant native plants, but honestly, I would at least begin to work on invasives. It can be quite satisfying. Okay, so here's my picture. So the top picture is what most woodlands look like nowadays. And you see all that evergreen layer under the trees. Well, that is without a doubt, that is largely invasive plants, because our natural woodlands would not look that way. If you look on the bottom, this is actually woods behind my house. That is an open woodland, and that is what they should look like. So we have something called wildflowers that are spring ephemerals, and they depend on the light hitting the forest floor. So when you have a situation as above, that's just not going to happen. So these are some little spring ephemerals that I either have on my property or found on my property, or planted on my property after I'd given my invasives a big hit. But that's just a concept to know. And I mean, it's widespread. So, and one thing, if you do focus on removing invasives, sometimes you find nice little surprises. So this is Japanese honeysuckle, and I had quite a bit of it. It girdles trees. It's one of our most widespread invasives. It's been invasive for decades. But then while I was pulling Japanese honeysuckle, right here, I found a little native coral honeysuckle just waiting to be released. It is not staged. It is absolutely true. And there it is. And actually, see how it is climbing the tree. They don't girdle the tree like the Japanese does, which can actually break a tree in two. How do they know the difference between, you know, I don't know whether that's a native tree or, you know, an invasive vine. I don't know. But I have observed that, and I would love for somebody to do a study of that. Yeah, there's the native honeysuckle further up the tree. So, and that's how they grow in the wild. If you grow it in more sun, it will be much more showy. But that's, if you find one, that's how you're likely to see it. And there, if you grow it in sun, it looks more like that. And of course, those are pollinated by ruby-throated hummingbirds. And their blossom is the exact same shape. So for invasive plants, there are normally a few species that are really creating a lot of trouble. And so in Charlotte, I mean, I lived in Charlotte, which is where most of, well, I guess the Mecklenburg chapter is, but and moved to Union County. And when I've gone back, there are at least 2 or 3 invasives that were not really on the horizon when I left that are quite widespread and problematic now. So I just marked some that I know you're likely to find in on a residential property. And then the new ones that I have seen are this bush honeysuckle. Now, I'm not sure this is the exact one because there are about 4 different species of bush honeysuckles that that are quite widespread in Charlotte now. And they just weren't around when I was there before. So that would be something to keep an eye on. Porcelain berry, which was an ornamental, well, so was the, you know, bush honeysuckle. Both of those are escapees from gardens, and the fig buttercup, which is becoming a big problem. It's mostly escaped from botanical gardens, and it can choke out floodplains It's pretty. In fact, all three of those are pretty, which makes it a harder thing to get people to recognize. But I encourage you to learn about these. There's the website I've put on there from the North Carolina Native Plant Society that lists, rank 1, rank 2, rank 3 invasives, but normally it's I'd say 3 to 5 species that are creating. They're like all over your property. If you have Chinese privet, for instance, you're going to have a lot of it. So that's not a matter of having to learn a lot of different species, but just to focus on a few species and to work on those. And here's some pictures. There's a porcelain berry. That's a big problem on the greenways. See, pretty berries. So, and it looks like a grape. So that's a problem too. Japanese honeysuckle, that's really more of the damage. I guess you can kind of see the leaves right there. I didn't mention calorie pear, which it was introduced maybe 2-3 decades ago, and it's already become widely invasive. Autumn olive, there are probably 3 other Elaeagnus that are a problem. This is the one I have on my property, but they're that picture I had of the removal from Freedom Park, I think that was another species. I think so. And then Chinese wisteria, of course, that's going to be blooming now, and it's pretty. So, but it's very destructive. Chinese ligustrum, this is probably one of our worst and most widespread, and it goes into floodplains, and it goes into, and it can take shade. So and it's evergreen. So all those things are not good, and it just it creates a berry that the birds carry with it and all that. Here's the another picture of the honeysuckle. This may be the one. I really need to take a closer look at it. There really are about 4 of them, and it is just all over Charlotte. That's all I got to say. So I was shocked, mortified. Anyway, and this fig buttercup. This picture is from behind. This is in Freedom Park, behind Winghaven, or yeah, that's right. And I mean, I've kind of watched it spread, and it's throughout the county. So, and it will go dormant by May. So if you don't address it while it's above ground, it will be back bigger and stronger next year, and it really will crowd out everything. You can see how thick it is, and for plants that are looking for the sun to complete their whole life cycle in the spring, that one gets out early and it outcompetes everybody else. This is a good website, invasive.org. It not only can you look up your plant and get pictures, but they will there are resources there for control measures, and you can also I think this EDD Map Pro maps where it occurs, and you can report species to that, so we can see how wide an outbreak it is, and where the biggest problems are. So now that was the news nobody likes. But when you remove invasives from your property, these are actually some that I found naturally occurring on my property, and some of them I would have seen without removing the invasives, which was mostly Japanese honeysuckle and Elaeagnus for me. But just being there and looking, so looking for the invasive, but while I'm looking, I will often see things that I probably would not have seen if I hadn't been out there doing that. So There's violet wood sorrel and the false foxglove. And these are all little discoveries that I made on my own property. Carolina lily, which is the state wildflower of North Carolina, not really in cultivation, but it occurs widely. I know it occurs in Mecklenburg County. It does not occur in big patches, but kind of singly. They're just kind of scattered around in dry wood. So it's dry shade is where it naturally grows. There's coral honeysuckle again. Here's this isn't the common violet. But it has a different leaf shape, and actually the flower shape is different too. But that was one of my little discoveries, as well as this halberd violet, which is tiny. It's very small. I mean, they can get a little larger, but most of them are just a few inches tall. And then this lance leaf anemone. These are just, and I am kind of lucky to be where I am, but I'm a landscape designer, so I get to poke around other people's properties, and I have found things there too. So you don't know until you look. So I encourage you to look and see what you might have before you plant. But planting is fun too. So anyway, North Carolina, well, even Mecklenburg County has over 1,000 native species. So it would be impossible to cover them all. I'm not even going to try because they're just too many. But here's some favorites of mine, and these are small perennials, shade perennials. But you do not want to put them where you really can't see them. And you want to, and they will need some sun. So these would be like partial shade or high shade. Dwarf crested iris is just adorable and one of my favorites. It occurs naturally here, as does green and gold. They bloom at the same time, which is nice. Partridge berry is an evergreen. It's actually considered a shrub, even though it is as flat to the ground as any plant can be, but it has what is considered a woody stem, and it creates a flower. It's actually two flowers that are fused at the base, and from those two flowers come one berry. And you can see where you can see two dimples where the two flowers were attached, cool. But it is evergreen. And I use that under my shrubs on my east facing foundation. Well, all of these three things are there, but as kind of a green mulch, and it just spreads. It doesn't want to have a lot of leaf mulch or any other kind of mulch on top of it. So it needs to photosynthesize, and if it gets just covered up, it won't be that happy. But I found it to be fairly easy to grow, and it's fun. Tiarella, now they're making discoveries of lots of new species of Tiarella in the South, especially. But cordifolia is one that you would see in rich woodlands. Bloodroot is a spring wildflower, but depending on the weather, it's not necessarily ephemeral. That leaf can hang around and enlarge throughout the summer if we don't have a really hot summer. Oh, a minute. Let's see. I need to get. Oh well, that was creeping phlox. I could normally do that. All right. Anyway, and then and like I said, I would put you can define a path by putting the small perennials along the edges, or at the front of a bed, or under shrubs or something like that. And then you have some larger perennials that can go behind. Now, and there are just so many. I mean, I know I've left out favorites in here, but these are some that are relatively easy, and they have good wildlife benefit. Eastern red columbine, I don't think that actually occurs in this county naturally, but it occurs in the foothills and the mountains for sure, and it grows well here, and it's hummingbird pollinated, and it kind of seeds itself around. White wood aster does well in kind of dryish, shaded areas. Its growth, its basal growth, its leaves are almost evergreen, so it can almost be kind of a green mulch too. And it blooms in late summer into fall, I think. Amsonia, there are a number of different Amsonias around, but this is the one that is actually native to Mecklenburg County, Tabernet, Montana, I think. I hope I didn't slaughter that name, but anyway, and it does host a moth, at least a moth, but it blooms early, and it's a pretty little early wildflower, because most of the early ones are the shorter wildflower type, like bloodroot and all that. So to have a taller perennial that is a little later is kind of nice. And then golden Alexander, I love. It's a host plant for the black swallowtail butterfly. It naturally occurs on my creek, so I had never seen it before, and I just noticed the gold umbel, and it's nearly evergreen. I mean, it has a long, the foliage hangs around for a long time, and it's pretty in its own right, but it's nice that it's a host plant for the black swallowtail too. And ferns. What could be better really than ferns? And these are all pretty tough ferns. They don't have to have complete shade, especially the top two, the Dixie wood fern, which is a natural hybrid between two southern species of fern. It can get quite large where there's enough moisture, which would not be at my house, but at other places. I've seen them almost 5 feet tall, but not at my house. They're more like in the 2 to 3 range, but still, they've done well with very little care. Christmas fern is probably our most widespread fern, and it's tough once it's established. It's evergreen, although the fronds will lie down in the winter. And over time, over lots and lots of time, they can form a substantial colony, but it's a nice hardy fern, and it actually works well in containers too. I have kind of been experimenting with containers, and that has worked. Lady fern is a moisture loving fern, so if it gets too dry, it will just go dormant. And well, I've got a grand dog that just came in. But anyway, she said hello. But lady fern, if it gets dry, it will just go dormant, and then when you have a rain, it will flush back out again. And it's easy. For moist woodlands, of course, there are lots of choices, but the Jack in the Pulpit is wonderful. If it, I mean, I won't go into the whole sex change it goes through, but it starts out being a Jack, and then if conditions are good, it becomes a Jill, and then if they turn bad again, it's complicated, but it's worth reading about. This is interesting. But if it is able to be fertilized, then it will produce a red fruit, which is really nice. Mayapple is common in moist woodlands. It can make quite a colony, and it too will make a fruit. And I believe that fruit is eaten by box turtles. And I think Native Americans might have used the fruit as well. Although I would not recommend it without doing some research because I think it may have some unfortunate side effects if you try to do it without knowing what you're doing. Black cohosh. Now this kind of is a bittersweet photo because that big patch there is from a rescue we did, and I'm afraid that's probably now under water for an irrigation lake. Boo hiss. But anyway, it's a beautiful and pretty easy perennial that is deer resistant. I know that's always an issue, but and the flower there, that patch hadn't quite gone into flower, so I had to throw in a flower. I think mosquitoes, there's something to do with mosquitoes not preferring this plant either, but I think it's beautiful. And of course it's used medicinally as well. And the other thing, you know, the trees, and which are predominantly oak here. Of course, we have oaks, maples, hickories, all of that. And really, you want to create layers in a woodland. And here are just a few that are that actually occur. They all occur right around here. So, but there are others as well. The sweet shrub, I love, and that one has been quite deer resistant for me as well. But it's, you know, it's fragrant. I think some of them are not so fragrant, but it's, you know, it kind of at a certain time of day they release their fragrance, and it's just a beautiful aroma. And I love the way they look too. They have an interesting pollination. I think it's either a fly or a beetle gets trapped in the blossoms overnight, and then they stumble out and look, you know, like they've been caught in a flower all night, and then buzz along and go to the next flower, and that's how they pollinate. Also, it creates a hard fruit pod, and that I think is dispersed by its own little mouse. But I know it's a little rodent that chews a hole in the side of the fruit. Pinkster azalea, that's the one that occurs here, but the Southeast has more native azaleas than any other area of the country. So if you want to have a native azalea garden, you can do that, and they bloom from anywhere from maybe late March until July, I believe. Different species do, but the pinkster is beautiful, and it's blooming right now. This big leaf snowbell, I had to throw it in just because it's one of these things that I found on my property. It's not really in cultivation because it's hard to cultivate and slow to grow, but it might be something that you might find on your property. I mean, it took me at least 8 years to realize I had one right next to my driveway. A very long driveway, but still, it's just it's an unappreciated tree. It's not totally absent from horticulture, but a few native nurseries grow it, but not many. I've been working on it for years. I still haven't cracked the code, but I keep trying. American fringe tree, it occurs in the woodland. I have them here, and I did not know that either, because in a shaded woods, they're high in the canopy. The flowers are not as showy, but give them a little sun like this. This is a garden setting where they get a little more sun, and it is just a beautiful small tree. And that one is pretty available. one thing I would encourage you to do is to look, if you want to really nerd out, Mecklenburg County, well, North Carolina, but Mecklenburg County in particular, is a very botanically rich county. It was one of the first counties to be inventoried for the Natural Heritage Inventory. You can see 1998, while the county where I live, Union, was one of the last to be inventoried, which was about, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago. Anyway, they produced a report, and it is helpful to me to see what has grown there, because some of it, now this is ginseng, and it does naturally occur in Mecklenburg County. And this is turtle head. I'm not sure if it's the which one it is, but I know I looked it up. But anyway, and it also talks about areas of the county where some of these rich areas are, and it can give you an idea of what might be successful planted in your garden. And you can look in North Carolina, you can look for any county, and this is available for you to see. You might have to purchase it now. When I got mine, it was free, but it's online, and I think I put the website down there, the North Carolina Natural Heritage Program, and that's through the Department of Agriculture. But it's quite interesting. It tells you soils and all that kind of stuff. Now, I don't know why that's there, so we're going to pretend it's not, aren't we? Gosh. Oh, okay. 2 more trees. Well, I already mentioned the French tree, but also the dogwood. I mean, that's, of course, is flowering now, and it's a great source of fruit for birds. And it's a natural understory tree. People try to plant them, in a front yard, and they can be unhappy. They have a shallow root system, and they really need to be mulched and not have a lot of interference at the base. There are good databases now. Audubon has one. I know the Wildlife Federation has one. And I would encourage you, this is Audubon, let's see. Yeah, there's Wildlife Federation, and Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center. It's one of the oldest. It's not as specific to North Carolina, but they give you good information on propagation protocols, and they're good on herbal uses. I mean, they used to be the only ones who did this, but they have a good database, and it does include our plants. The North Carolina Native Plant Society, I have to put in a plug for us, but and there's also a booklet that's available online that's landscaping for the Piedmont. And as I said, it can't be comprehensive because really there are just too many native plants in North Carolina. And the North Carolina Extension has really upped their game, I am proud to say, and I use it as a tool. So I would strongly suggest that you give it a try and look. You can filter, you can do a plant search and filter by your conditions. So whatever, part shade, dry, in the Piedmont, and native plants. That's what you have to, I think it's listed under type of garden or garden theme as a native plant garden. But that way you can see what there is available, and the benefit with using that is that they're gardeners, so it's not a field guide. It's it gives you some understanding of how to to plant it in your garden, like, what it might need, or what characteristics it has, and how they would do in a garden setting. Oh, no. Okay, well, I've got a random slide there, so oops. So I had a couple of books I wanted to recommend, and I don't know where they went, but did anybody have any questions, or did I disappear?
Yes, yes, Lisa, we do have questions.
Okay.
Okay, here's one that when Charlotte has infrastructure projects like putting in water and sewer pipes, like they're doing along Dairy Branch in South Charlotte, they plant natives to keep invasive plants from roaring in when the project is done.
Oh, how to keep from that from happening?
Well, they're wondering if when Charlotte does that type of project, do they come back in and put in native plants
I would
in
say
those areas that have been disturbed?
I would doubt it. Well, it depends. It depends on the project. Now they do better, I think, in stormwater retention areas, but it's difficult because, I mean, invasive plants are opportunists, and freshly turned earth is an opportunity. So, I mean, it's better now than it's been, but I mean, I think it's burlap, and although they will do, because I've worked with stormwater, and they will go in and do some live stakes and things like that. So stormwater would be one of the better departments to deal with because they have more of an understanding, but it's still disruptive and it's difficult, but yeah.
It is.
So, I mean, I would try to talk to somebody in the department about it. And, there is a program in Charlotte, a cost share program, especially if you were having that done on your property. There are monies available to do that on your own property. I know. So I would get in touch with the stormwater department about that.
Okay. I'm going to go back into the chat. Let's see. Someone wanted to know if the honeysuckle will do well in a pot.
Yes. In fact, one of the pictures I post all the time is of my honeysuckle pot. So it's been, I think I've had that in there for 10 years, and it's not really in complete full sun. And actually, as a confession, a few of those little honeysuckles are from some I accidentally pulled before I realized I had native honeysuckle on my property. And I felt bad and stuck them in a pot. I have a cultivar in there too, I think, but and I've potted it up once. So it was in a pretty good sized pot, and then I went to a larger pot, and it has been pretty stable. I planted green and gold at the base, and Eastern red columbine, and I've kind of experimented with it, and it outgrew its original obelisk. So I got some rebar, which of course is inexpensive, and tied it, made a kind of a teepee out of it, and it's doing great. So yeah, it's a great thing, and it's on my deck where I can see it. So
oh, that's cool.
That's fun.
Cool. Okay, and then let's see. Someone would like to know how to deal with Japanese stilt grass.
Oh, brother. Well, it's tricky because a Japanese stilt grass is an annual, but it seeds prolifically. It's a timing issue. You have to get to it before it flowers. If you get there too early, it will bounce back better than ever, which is bad. So it's like late September, early October. as it's beginning to bloom, and before it sets seed. Now you could use a weed eater, you could use a mower, but you have to mow really low, because I mean, they're not invasive for no reason. I mean, they're tricky. So and it's easy to pull, but the problem is there's so much of it that is very difficult to pull. Now, I will use chemicals, but I think that one, I think there's a very low concentration. And of course, if you're working near water, you want to make sure you get one that is to be used near water, because it's usually the detergents that are so bad with aquatic life. But anyway, there's some that are regulated and safe and marked as safe for aquatic. But I mean, it's like 0.5%. It's something very low. It's low enough that it does not affect other perennials, but it does affect the stiltgrass. So that's where invasive.org, I would look on there. And there's also the North Carolina invasive. It's invasive. It's like IPNNC, the Invasive Plant Council for North Carolina. But they have good information. So there are a number of different things you can do, but you really need to understand the life cycle of the plant. And you can get it 1 year, it's going to be in the seed bank. So you'll have less, but really just being persistent is the key. And I would invite any of you to come down to the Mineral Springs Greenway, because we have a great volunteer that has organized regular invasive removal. And I mean, they have done miraculous things. They even took on the stiltgrass. So it's amazing. So, but the privet, I mean, we had like a privet forest, an impenetrable privet forest. And I just led a hike there this weekend, and what was there where all this hard privet had been? American plum, which I'd never seen there before. I mean, there's a lot of cool stuff over there anyway, but it's nice to see something that you haven't seen before that's kind of been released from the privet hell. So anyway, but microbes teach them too, because if floodplains, boy, it just washes it, it's just awful. And so I haven't really examined how that went, but I know they worked on that last year too.
Oh. Now someone wants to know if you can plant partridge berry or tea berry under blueberries.
Well, tea berry, now I would have said I would never recommend that in the Charlotte area, but then I had a client who had the nicest stand of it. I still don't know how she did it. It was like it was almost in the hell strip around Myers Park, like off of Providence Road. And I still don't know how she did it, because normally that's a mountain plant. It's very acidic, very well drained, but certainly you could try. I mean, the partridge berry is the one. I mean, I think that's a little easier, but you could try either one. I just wouldn't invest in a lot of plants. I would try a plant or two and see if they're happy, but they would like about the same conditions. So I would think that could work well. Yeah.
And can ferns take flooding up to 3 times a year, like if they're in a swale?
It depends on the fern. Some ferns are more moisture loving than others. Like Christmas fern, if you look at where it grows, it does not grow in the wettest of wet places, but cinnamon fern does. And lady fern does. So I would think that either of those two, maybe ostrich fern and royal fern, but I think those are getting out of I think those are more northern or higher elevation ferns. But certainly the cinnamon fern and lady fern will take water.
And then Linda had a comment about black cohosh, saying that it gives height in a woodland, and it's
Uh-huh.
and that it will eventually reseed and spread. And has a love, and Kristen noted it has a lovely scent.
Well, Linda and I we both love black cohosh because we found we were on a rescue, and the only trilliums we could find really were the ones that were in and among black cohosh, because deer don't like black cohosh, but they do like trillium. So
Yeah.
and I mean, I've found it to be a pretty tough plant that has done well. It hasn't been a prima donna, you know.
I might have to try
Sorry,
some.
Donna.
Yeah, I might have to try some
Yeah,
in the back where it's kind of dry, but
it's beautiful. It really is, and it blooms in late summer.
yeah.
So and it does. It has a it's kind of stately, you know. So I really love it.
Hmm.
Oh,
And
and I
this,
also found where they did the invasive removal. Sorry, it's exciting over at the Greenway. I had seen, but I knew I had seen black cohosh over there, and then it disappeared, you know, because it was, microspedium, privet everywhere, and they did, this big removal, and lo and behold, I found a nice little stand of black cohosh over there. That kind of
and
makes
then
my heart
Linda,
go pitter patter.
oh, Linda also commented that sweet shrub is easy to grow from seed.
Yes, it
That's
is.
good to know.
It-
That's good to know.
and it will sucker. Like some people get really offended if when things sucker, um, because they want a plant to stay exactly where they put it. And sweet shrub doesn't necessarily do that. So you can also move um, those little volunteers to other places. But yes, it's fun to get those seeds out of those seed pods, and yeah, and it's an easy one. Um, but now I plant mine outside, and I'm pretty sure Linda does the same thing, and just let them naturally go through the winter, and then they germinate in the spring. So they go through stratification. I use a low tech method for that, but
And then here's a great question. How do we get on the list for rescuing plants from areas that will be built on?
huh. Well, now in the Native Plant Society, this is always an issue for us, but you really need a person that's dedicated to being kind of the point person for rescues. If you don't have that person, there won't be the opportunities. Georgia, for some reason, the Georgia Native Plant Society is a machine on this. I mean, they have contacts. You have to have someone who's going to go to the planning office, or who's going to, so you can know when it's going to happen before it happens. Now, the Native Plant Society, we did buy insurance, and we have a waiver. I mean, we did the things that we need to do to rescue plants if we have the opportunity, but it's the opportunity that's the problem. I mean, I know I'm too busy to do that, and our chapter has never had a person that was really dedicated to it. Now, Linda is in another chapter, and they had like a fabulous 3-year rescue where a dam was being built. So, and they've had others too, but we've had 2 that kind of fell into our lap here. But yeah, I mean, so you would need to join the Native Plant Society, because it is a members only thing because of the liability insurance. Yeah, you need to, because people will say to me, oh, well, I see it growing on the side of the road. I could just go and dig some. Or they say, oh, you just go and dig it. No, do not do that. That's poaching. I mean, you need permission. That's one reason that native plants are in peril, especially the Venus flytrap. That's now a felony. Finally, we did get that passed. Because poachers, they don't know. I mean, they don't know. And then people will poach lady slippers, which will never live. I mean, I think Linda's group, when they were on that long rescue, I think she might have learned how to actually rescue one so that it could live. But I mean, I think it takes like 17 years from seed to bloom for lady slippers, and they have very exacting needs in the soil. So people dig them up like around Mother's Day, and they're not going to live. They're just going to die. So don't buy them from anybody that does that. Also, ginseng is poached. It's also harvested. I mean, we allow harvest of tens of thousands of pounds every year, but there's also illegal harvesting. So I mean, that's puts all these native plants in peril. So you can grow them from seed. That's something else you can learn from the Native Plant Society, or like I said, the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center has good propagation protocols. It can be done, but you do want to make sure that you get plants that are ethically grown, and don't just go digging stuff up. Don't go digging stuff up on the side of the road. That's not cool.
Lisa, do you have some books to recommend?
Yes, that's what I did not get to. Go ahead. Did I hear somebody?
That wasn't me. No, go
Oh,
ahead.
okay. All right. That was a goblin at your house. But anyway, now this one it could even be out of print, but for shade gardening, I bet it's at the library. So it's called The American Woodland Garden by Rick Darke, Darke. And he at that time was living in Pennsylvania, I think, but he's from North Carolina, so he has a North Carolina sensibility, and there's hardly anything in there that would not work for North Carolina. Also, he co-wrote with Doug Tallamy. I'll see, now I'm going to get the title. The Living Landscape. That's it. And he really walks you through how to plant areas and to do it in layers. I mean, they talk about that, and kind of the green mulch thing, because I mean, if you want to cover a lot of area, it can be quite expensive. But one thing you can do, if you use open pollinated plants, they'll set seed, and he addresses that, which I really like. So like the Amsonia that I showed you, or the whitewood aster, if you put 3 of those, in an area, they will reseed, and so that will help fill in your area. But anyway, that's good, and it also gives you kind of how to create a bed and stuff like that. So those are 2, and of course, well, we have Dr. Melachamp's 2 books. The newest one would be the Native Plants Primer for the Southeast. Of course, I'm not going to get the title right. That's a really good one for beginners. The good things about his books is that those are for gardens, because so many native plant books are really guidebooks, which is great. And I love it because, I wander around looking at things and trying to identify plants. I mean, I like to go visit plants in the wild, but if you want to have a garden, then it's good to have that garden knowledge with native plants. And that's what those two books do. So, I mean, I know you can look it up with Dr. Larry Mellichamp.
I think it's Native Plants of the Southeast.
Yes, that's the first one. And then the second one is more basic. Yeah, but it is different. I mean, it does have it's different, and it doesn't have so much. It doesn't have the bog gardening and all that kind of stuff, I don't think. But it's geared towards more towards beginners. But it's also good to read. I mean, there are things about deer, and which is always an issue. And you know, they're good, each good in their own right.
And do you have recommendations on places near Charlotte to get seedlings or seeds of plants you've recommended?
Well, the Native Plant Society has, our chapter has just started a seed library
Mr. Haney.
at Reedy
Mm,
Creek Nature Center. And then we also have a seed exchange at least once a year. You know, this is not an easy thing. I think So True Seed, it's a North Carolina company, and I think they may have native plants. They're not exclusively native. But you can look on the North Carolina Native Plant Society website, ncwildflower.org, and we have a list of nurseries. And Linda's reminding me that we have our annual meeting and picnic and plant sale and auction. So that is a great place to get plants. And that's in June, and it's actually at Pfeiffer University this year. It's usually in Greensboro. But it's a really nice event, and you get a lot of knowledge, a lot of camaraderie, and plants. Who doesn't want plants? So yeah, that's a good place. Yeah, I think UNCC just finished their plant sale, and so did Winghaven. But we do have a list of nurseries on the website.
Yeah, and Mecklenburg County Park and Rec is going to have a native plant sale. I think in 2 weeks. It's going to be at McDowell Nature Preserve.
Right, that's very
I just saw
exciting.
that, right?
Because they had a great greenhouse and everything.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and you know, and then you know, Lisa has a nursery, so
I do.
she's a good source of a lot of these plants.
And I'm on the Native Plant Society list too, I think.
Yes, you are. And then, I mean, there are others around the state, because I know
Yes,
other
yes.
people on here from around the state, but
Yes.
there's a couple around, I want to say Cary, Chapel Hill.
Uh-huh.
some
Yeah,
of
they
that
have
area, and
many
there's
more.
a couple up in the near the mountains.
They have more than we do. I mean, that's kind of how I backed my way into it to start with, is that we just didn't have the numbers that they have elsewhere in the state. So yeah, that's statewide, because it's a statewide society.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then can you speak to where and how to start with cleaning out invasives in our wooded areas on our own property?
I would start with a plant. I started with Japanese honeysuckle. So I learned to recognize it. And honestly, I would pull some on the way to the mailbox. I wouldn't come back for several hours. My family said, "Oh, don't worry, Mom's in the woods." You know, I mean, I guess I could have been abducted, but I wasn't. But anyway, I mean, I would just either take an area or just focus on a plant, and you know, don't try to do it all at once. You're not going to get it all done at once. Now, the reason I like Japanese honeysuckle for that is because unless it's a really big vine, as long as the ground is moist like it is right now, you can pull it, and then I kind of wrap it up in, you know, the root and kind of hang it in the tree, you know, as a warning to other Japanese honeysuckle. But I mean, that's what I did. And I also would start with mature plants that are fruiting. So some of my Japanese honeysuckle had gotten all the way up in the trees, making fruit, spreading more. So I would start with the mature ones. The same thing with Iliagnus, the same thing with privet. Now those, you can cut them. One important thing to remember is that plants make their own food. They're the only creatures, I think, except, I don't know, does algae make its own food? But anyway, it makes its own food through photosynthesis. So if you cut it down so it has no leaves, it cannot photosynthesize. Now, it'll resprout, and you'll have to cut it some more, but eventually it will give it up. Now, you can also paint the cut very soon after you've made a cut with like a 20% solution of Roundup. That way you're not broadcasting it everywhere. It just helps prevent resprouts. And there are other methods you can use that So you're using as little as possible and as targeted away as possible. I mean, that's my approach. And then, you know, you may have a patch. Well, I had English ivy that was on an oak. Those can also grow to maturity and reproduction. That's why if you look at invasive.org, you can get good information and photos so you can see what they look like, because it changes the leaf shape from lobed to like heart shaped. And that's when you have a mature ivy, and that's when they're old enough to flower and fruit. And those are the ones I go after first. Because in the babies, you know, you can get them later. So get the big reproducers first, and at least that can help slow it down.
Yeah. Is elderberry invasive?
No, it's rambunctious. It means that nature wants a lot of it because it is, it can spread, it will sucker, but it is a great native plant. I mean, of course, I should have taken my own advice here, but just think about it, about where you plant it, because it will spread, but it is a great plant. And it can overtake other plants. So you don't want to put it in a place where you have, you know, very special plants that are, you know, can't take competition, but where you have the space and, you know, and other plants that are vigorous, then it's a great wildlife plant.
Then Candace mentioned, she said, always check with your local county extension and master gardener sites. Those are good resources. And they just ordered pollinators for their neighborhood in Raleigh. But also her question was, why not use vinegar and water instead of Roundup?
Well, you know, vinegar will kill amphibians possibly more effectively than Roundup. And I know, I mean, you know, I know that's a big issue, and really most of it comes from overuse and misuse of that. I mean, it's been way overused, and that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about for a specific thing, you know, and then you're doing a job that has a beginning and an end. You're not using it every Saturday to you know, to trim your whatever weeds by your sidewalk. I mean, you know, and you dab it on, so you're not spraying it everywhere either. So but most people do not do that. I mean, it's there are directions, you know, you're not supposed to use it outside of temperature zones, if wind, you know, there's a specific way to use it, but you do have to be careful with vinegar. And I saw a guy, let's see, I think he used duct tape to make a little collar around a cut and put maybe Epsom salts in there. That could work. I'm not saying, but you know, salt is dangerous. I mean, you know, if you think about a frog, you know, their skin is so porous. I mean, salt would not be good for a frog, but if you could figure out a way to do it, I mean, I would have nothing against it at all. I mean, if that worked, but you can also just cut it and cut it and cut it, and it will give it up eventually. But it'll take more time. But you know, get a good pair of loppers and just knock it down when it comes back up again. So if they can't make food, they're not going to live.
Yeah. One thing that I've been doing that seems to be working, we had a couple of Chinese hollies that we had taken down to the ground, and I put in it, and it's a specific area, it's not a huge area. I covered it with thick layers of cardboard and leaves, and lots of leaves. So so where one had started to sprout from the root, I'd cut that off so there's no light getting to it. So I have my fingers crossed that this is
hollies
what I need to do.
Hollies are they're tough. They try to come,
Yeah.
you know, they try to come in.
Yeah.
But you can do that with them too. The other thing you can do is score the cut and put like compost on there to try to, you know, get it get those microorganisms in there, but
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, they're going to try to live.
They are. They are. Tatiana noted that if you're in the Durham area, there's someone at the farmer's market in Durham that sells native plants, specifically
Yes.
native
Oh,
plants.
that's good.
So
Yeah.
that's good. So that's another thing to check out your farmers markets and see what they have. And some communities will have, you know, they may not have them every week or whatever, but they'll have native plant sales. I know Lisa has a booth at the Matthews Farmers Market about every
It's
other week.
beginning Saturday. Well, but I would also encourage people, I mean, maybe I have a suspicious nature, but if you have the botanical name, check it to make sure, because a lot of people are getting into native plants now. I hope they all know what they're doing. We can, but it doesn't hurt to spot check it to make sure that you're getting what you mean to be getting. Because I mean, that is something that people just had not thought about much. And, you know, not everybody's as knowledgeable as, and people make mistakes too. So, I mean, you know, it just, don't just take someone's word for it. I mean, it doesn't hurt to check. You know, you can tell kind of by talking to people, but I mean, and if they don't have a botanical name on there, that would also make my spidey senses go off. So, I mean, it could be correct, but I mean, you know, it just, you know, that's not good practice. So,
Lisa, could you speak to the issue of cultivars of natives?
yes. Well, I know this is another hot issue. I am not a purist on this because all cultivars come from an existing plant. There's a cultivar for honeysuckle that is called Major Wheeler, and it was a good performer that was found on the coast of North Carolina. And so someone took a cutting and got it named. I mean, that's anytime you take a cutting, that is a clone of a plant because they're not open pollinated. And because I've worked in design and I've worked with homeowners that are, you know, they're in subdivisions, they're uptown. And I mean, you know, we're talking about a true moonscape out there. There's grass. I mean, it's pretty bleak. And, you know, if a cultivar, which is more compact or has better flowers or whatever, is going to be more acceptable to the HOA in the front yard, then to me, that is a good thing to do. Now, some cultivars get so far from the original plant that they lose the benefits that they had. So I would be wary of that. Like double flowers is one, and you know, and these cone flowers that I mean, I don't, you know, there are all these cone flowers in different colors now, and those are different species. I don't do any of those. I mean, I may get a selection of the purple, but or I may even use another species, although I really haven't. But I'm, you know, I just wouldn't do that. And I'll tell you a good place to look if you want to see how native plants perform. That's at the Mount Cuba Center. It's in Delaware. It's a garden that's been around a long time, and they do plant trials. And they don't just trial for you know, longevity or vigor and flower size and all that, powdery mildew. They now also trial for pollinator activity. And there's at least one cultivar in the garden phlox that where butterflies actually prefer the cultivar, which is unusual. Usually they prefer the species. So anyway, I mean, it's a complicated issue. I don't think it's black and white. And I just think you have to, you know, you have to understand why you're planting native plants, if it's, you know, and I really think a cultivar is still an improvement over a boxwood. So
I guess getting back to the herbicide question. Someone wanted to know if you could use rubbing alcohol in water.
I use rubbing alcohol on my lemon tree inside the house. I don't know. I mean, you have to be careful. Just
Yeah.
because something is common to us does not mean that it's not harmful. And even like neem oil. I mean, I've had, it's made my tongue numb from not getting it on my tongue, getting it on my hands. So, I mean, almost all drugs and chemicals originally came from plants. So, so don't think, and there are plenty of toxic plants too.
Well,
So
and just because it's organic doesn't mean it's safe.
well, that's exactly right. So you just have to think about it and talk to people. But I mean, sometimes Roundup is a better choice. And I know that people get mad about it. I mean, but I think the science would back that up. And but if you don't want to do that, you still need to check out what the risk can be. Now I know there's some interesting thing being done for fire ants. Well, there's the whole fungal thing, but then there's I'm trying to think what they used. It was like helium. It was something. Well, Debbie Roos posted something about it, and it has promise. But then there could be other climate issues. But anyway, it was something that sounded interesting, because I certainly would be much happier to do. You want to do the least toxic thing that will get the job done. That's the issue.
I'm looking through these. Someone else want to know with the English ivy if that could be covered with cardboard, or would they need to really cut it back? They need to cut it back first.
If it's on your trees, you need to get it off the trees. And that's back to going to the most harmful form it's in. So you want to make sure, and you need to get every single tendril, cut a swath about 2 feet wide. You can cut at the base of the tree and get all the English ivy cut, and then cut like 2 to 3 feet up and cut all of it, and then pull all that off that area so that the top growth isn't getting any food. It's not getting any water from the base, because where the roots are. And it will take some time, but if you've gotten every tendril, then that upper growth will begin to die off and blow, and it'll blow away. I would not try to pull it off, because they have aerial roots that attach to the bark, so you can actually do some harm just trying to get it off. But if you cut it, and then you can just watch and wait for it to die, it's nice.
Well, she said it's off her trees. It's
off her trees.
left is on the ground.
Okay, well then I would try to mow it as short as you can get it, and then cover it up. But yeah, you could try it. I mean, it's I'm telling you, they're tough customers. And I mean, I ended up using Roundup on mine because it was so thick. I couldn't pull it. I couldn't even pull it. And I'm not weak. And I'm certainly motivated, but it weakened it enough that I could actually pull it. And then I had microstegium come up under that. But then I got rid of that. I pulled that, got it gone. And the next year I found morel mushrooms growing in. I haven't seen them again, but I did see morel mushrooms, so that was good. I looked again today too.
Let's see. I was looking to make sure I haven't missed any. Someone did want to know if there's anyone in the local chapter that puts together and installs residential native gardens. We do not. We're all volunteers, and we don't really have the resources to do that. We can point you in the direction of some people that do that. I know that Lisa can help with that. There's also a company called Eco Backyards. You can look them up. They could help you out with that also.
I'll tell you, labor is tough in landscaping right now. I mean, just across the board. But yeah, and I think both Audubon and the Native Plant Society, I think they also list people. But again, I would check references, because people, I would see if they have references and stuff like that, because
Right.
when something's kind of new and there's a demand for it, sometimes people get on the bandwagon before they ought to get on. So
Yeah. And and there are some nurseries around that carry native plants as well as non-native plants. So that's why Lisa, I'll reiterate with her, using the botanical name, because sometimes they'll have what they call a native section, but you'll find non-natives in there also. So really, have it down what you're looking for, or if you see one, just Google it,
That's right.
and you can say, blah blah plant origin, and you
well, or go to the USDA plants and just put in the botanical name, and they'll tell you where it comes from.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have a computer in your pocket, you need to use it, because that's just something you have to do for yourself. I mean, it really is important to do that, because things slip through. People make mistakes. They have typos,
Yeah.
But I would also say that virtually every nursery has some native plants. They may not know it. That's why it's good for you to know. But but almost all of them do, and a lot of them have been in the trade for a long time. But we didn't think about it, so it wasn't important. But
Right.
yeah.
Right. I mean, yeah, back when our country was first being settled and everything, a lot of people brought plants with them to make them feel more at home.
That's
Or,
right.
there was the move to have these beautiful gardens, and nobody really understood what was happening. And, so it's a process. And, and now we're realizing, we need to protect our native plants. And
Right. Well, and there was so much nature. I think
right.
one motivation was that you wanted to show that you weren't you were civilized, right? Your little plot of land was cultivated and civilized, and so you wanted that evergreen azalea or that camellia or that hydrangea, and that that showed that this was settled land. But now that is not the case. But it was the case, certainly when my ancestors arrived. There were many fewer people, and much less land was developed and settled. So yeah.
Right. Okay, well, I think our time is up, and we've gotten to, if not every question, most of them. And just want to thank Lisa for spending her evening with us and bringing good information to us about native plants in general, and her recommendations for things that would work well in our shady areas. If you have more questions, you can email them to me at charlottewildlifestewards@gmail.com, and I will make sure Lisa gets them and will respond to you.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, thank you.
Thank
It was
you.
a pleasure.